snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hi guys, so I am here today to do a book review, and the book that I'm going to be reviewing is Pathfinder, which is by Orson Scott Card. This is a book that Amanda from the Marvellous Reading Room and I were co-reading, and we had a great time chatting about the book and analysing it as we went. So this review might be a little bit long because I've got a lot of different things to say about this. I ended up giving it a 3.5 star rating. Not bad, but not amazing. It's a good kind of gateway into sci-fi. It definitely has a YA feel to it. Let's get on with the review. So one thing that I did have a little bit of an issue with this book, and so did Amanda, was that we kind of felt like it suffered a little bit from first book syndrome, which is essentially where it's the first book in a series and it kind of doesn't answer all of your questions and it kind of doesn't give much away because it's all very introductory. It's introducing you to the world, it's introducing you to the characters, but it doesn't always answer all the questions you have, and that can be a little bit irritating, and sometimes it felt as though there were things that were dragged out a little bit more than necessary in order to allow the extra books in the series. That's not to say that it's bad, it's not to say that it really drags, because it doesn't, but it is to say that I think this whole story could have been condensed quite a lot, down to about 300 or 400 pages, not the 650 pages that it is, because yeah, that's a little bit unnecessary. There was a lot of repetition or things that I just didn't enjoy that much that weren't that necessary and weren't pivotal to the plot that were kind of thrown in. So the storyline of this book is basically focused around two parallel storylines. There is the main storyline, which focuses on our main character Rig and a friend of his called Umbo. Those two characters have a very interesting relationship, the way that they kind of become friends and the way that they start travelling together is all revealed at the beginning of the book, and very complicated, quite weird way that they actually end up travelling together, so that's interesting. They're quite good friends, but they don't really know that much about each other because Rig, up until this point, has lived his life predominantly in the woods with his dad, who has been teaching him all of the ways of the world, and he's not spent that much time socialising with the other children in the village that he's from or lives near. And so basically Rig doesn't know that much about having friends, and he doesn't really have any. He does, however, know a lot about everything else in the world because his father actually kind of quizzed him as he was growing up and kind of drilled into him lots of really interesting scientific ideas about how to manage money, ideas about different languages and accents that you can use and manners that you can put across to make yourself seem better. It's a very interesting relationship that they had where his father basically just quizzes him day in and day out whilst they go out and trap animals in the woods about anything and everything, and Rig sees it as a little bit pointless. He's not really sure why he's being tested on all this because he doesn't think it will actually have any relevance, but he does kind of enjoy the challenge of chatting with his father and trying to outsmart his father on various different ideas, and it's quite a fun relationship, and I really enjoyed that aspect at the beginning. That was a really cool thing to see them sort of going back and forth, theorising about all of these interesting problems and ideas around the world. The second storyline that we also focus on in this book is that of Ram. Ram is a young man who is on a spaceship, and he is travelling on the spaceship with a large amount of expendables, which is basically robots. They are travelling to try and find a new planet, and that's all I'm going to say because his storyline is crazy and it's very interesting because there's not much revealed and it takes a long time for you to kind of get all of the pieces. We don't really know his purpose, we don't really understand why he's there, and it takes a little while to get those answers, but when you do, it's all kind of clicks and it's all exciting and interesting. So yeah, I would say definitely persevere with that storyline because at first it was quite irritating that I just didn't know what was going on, but as you go through this, you will start to see that there are actually really interesting things happening, and that's quite cool. The main storyline basically starts when Rig's father gets into an accident and Rig has to travel out into the big wide world with his friend and kind of start his own adventure. Now, one of the really cool aspects from this book is that there are really interesting powers that people have. So it has elements of sci-fi, but it also has elements of fantasy. For example, the main character Rig is a Pathfinder, which means that he can see where people have been before him. He can see paths of animals and people where they have been before. And that's a really interesting kind of quality to him, and it adds a new dimension to the book. There's also other things that do crop up throughout the book, other ideas and powers, but I'm not going to say who has them or how you find out about any of those because that's quite the mystery. I really enjoyed the character of Rig as the story began, but as it progressed I found him to become quite irritating and a little bit obnoxious, which was quite a sad thing because he was a really sweet character at the beginning. Kind of evolves as a character and becomes somewhat different to the initial impression that we get of him. That's a little bit annoying, and he can come across as a little bit temperamental and full of himself, which is not the best quality. However, he is a very intelligent character and he does come up with some interesting solutions to the problems that they get into, so that's a cool element to him too. Umbo, I thought he was a great character. He was very sweet, he was endearing, and he said the most hilarious things at random times. He just came out with these comments that made him just seem really funny and laughable and enjoyable. One issue that I did have, and Amanda did have, with this book was that we felt as though it was kind of talking down to the reader. There are a lot of scientific things that go on and big theoretical questions that they talk about, and those were kind of discussed in great detail to the point where it felt a little bit dumbed down, and there were moments where things were being repeated over and over to try and clarify for the reader what was going on. But in fact, because it was repeated so many times in various ways, it kind of made it a lot longer than necessary and overcomplicated things a little bit too much. The story as a whole is a really interesting one. There's a lot of mystery to it. There's a lot of why are they doing this? What are they doing? We don't understand. And gradually things get revealed and you can start to guess things and kind of theorise about what might happen, which was what we were doing and really enjoying. But yeah, it's a really fun story. For my first ever Orson Scott Card, I thought it was interesting and fun. I've heard a lot of people don't like Orson Scott Card because of his opinions, and I would agree with that. I don't particularly like the ideas he puts across, but that still doesn't mean that I wouldn't read his books. I just wouldn't contribute money towards him particularly, and I think that he's a great writer. I think he can be really interesting with how he writes, and although I haven't read Ender's Game, I have watched the film and I really enjoyed it, so I do want to pick up Ender's Game at some point. I also feel like I would like to continue on with this series after reading this book because although it had some problems to it, it also really enticed me and the ending was quite intriguing, so I do want to find out what happens in the next book. So that is all of the thoughts that I had on this without being spoilery, and I would love to know what you guys think of this. If you've read it, then let me know in the comments below. Tell me what you thought about the characters, the plot, and just everything that happens, and I would love to see you all very soon in my next video. Bye! Me and you gonna have a little